So I had focused on myself my entire life. I guess when I was around 40 years old, I got to the point where I was stripped of everything materialistically. But to get to the point of being stripped of everything that I had materially, and I got very sick and I had to have an operation, I think I did have an epiphany about what is important and what does matter. Kind of had a spiritual awakening, as in it's not going to be all about me, and that I was going to give back. And, I found the perfect vehicle. The elderly. I mean, if I had a cartoon character, it would be Defender of the Elderly with a little cape, DE.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Kate, and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's guest will talk about her transformation from being somewhat self-absorbed to her passion for caring for others. She was living a picture-perfect life as a wife and mother, and was actually the winner of the Mrs. Mississippi pageant. Following her divorce, she changed the inward focus of her life from herself to others. She's got a great story.
3, 2, 1.
Aimee Barresi, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Oh, thank you for having me, and also thank you for pronouncing my last name correctly.
All right, well, good. We're off to a great start. All right, so Aimee, tell us where you are presently in your life, kind of what you do, family, just kind of catch us up.
Well, I am the proud mother of 2 children, a daughter who's 22 and in law school, and a son who's a senior in high school who is already accepted to go to Auburn University in the fall, and he's going to become a commercial pilot, so he's going to be going to flight school there. And I am a full-time hospice employee, and I take care of every need that our patients have as far as companionship, spirituality, anything that a terminal patient would need that is non-medically related.
Okay. So now let's go back. So talk about your life when you were married. Kind of what was life all about for you back then?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was definitely picture perfect. I met my husband while working on a cruise ship as an entertainer. I've been to 23 different countries. I worked on cruise ships for 6 years. It was absolutely a dream existence. I had a lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of interesting people. I got to go to a lot of places. And one day a man came on board and decided that he wanted me to become his wife. And I agreed, and we got married, and we had what would appear on the outside to be a perfect life. He was officer in the military. He flew jets, F-16. So, I was really into Top Gun. So I had my own little Maverick, and we had 2 children, and I was a stay-at-home mom. I was also able to pursue my passions, which were writing. I wrote for a local newspaper, modeling, and competing in beauty pageants.
Tell us about the Mrs. Mississippi pageant. When were you in that?
I started competing in 2003 and won my title in 2004. And I was really geared up to do a lot with the system. And a storm called Katrina hit and took away our home and all of our belongings. So my children and I had to relocate for 3 months after we lost our home. So I didn't see my husband. He was very busy. He was the squadron commander, and he also was assisting in all the relief efforts. They had a lot of National Guard troops come in to help with the recovery and then the rebuilding down on the coast. So it was, it was a pretty scary and tumultuous time.
Being in the Mrs. Mississippi pageant, why would you want to do something like that? What drives you to want to compete in that type of a pageant?
Well, as a little girl, I grew up in New Jersey watching the Miss America pageant, which was filmed, and it was on live television. I remember saying to my parents, I want to grow up and I want to be Miss New Jersey and I want to be Miss America. And they scoffed and poo-pooed, and they said, little Italian girls don't become beauty queens. They either become wives or mothers, or there was the option of becoming a nun, which thankfully I chose not to do, but it was offered to me as a career choice.
Let's talk about your divorce, and we don't have to get into the nuts and bolts or the reasons why and that kind of stuff, but kind of take us through that time and how it affected you.
Sure. So all in 1 year's time, we lost our home in Katrina. The kids were fine. I was fine. My beloved mother-in-law was diagnosed, died of ovarian cancer. And then my parents, who had been married for 38 years, announced that they were getting divorced. So within that short amount of time, I think everything just came down on my husband and I, and it ended in the crumbling and destruction of our marriage. So it was, really sad. And it was almost like this picture perfect family of the dashing husband and the beauty queen wife and our adorable children. It was just like cracks in the facade. And, everybody around us was pretty surprised. But it started out on my own.
Well, and let's talk about that. So now, you're divorced. You got to start out on your own. I assume you need to get a job.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you do?
Well, I had been doing, been pursuing all of my passions, which were modeling and then running the pageant, which paid $0, and writing for the local newspaper. But, that wasn't going to cut it. And I had declined going after my husband's retirement and pension because I truly believed that, as someone who went and fought in 3 wars over in the Gulf, that was his money and money for the kids. And, it was to the shock and amazement of all the other military wives that I was friends with. But I said, I'm not going to go after his money. That's his money. So I did strike out on my own, and I started working for a nursing home, which I never would have imagined growing up with all my different hopes and dreams that was something that I would do. But I fell in love with it.
When you first started working for a nursing home, was that your passion at the time, or was that just the available job?
I needed a very good job that paid health care, and that was something that I could depend on. And health care, any job in healthcare is probably one of the most consistent paychecks that you can get. I highly recommend it.
Okay. So you start working at a nursing home, so you start caring for the elderly.
Yes.
So how does that change your life?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think the first time that I knew that someone was in the room and they were getting ready to pass, and the nurse was going in and out, and I said, can I go in there? And she looks at me like, of course, sure. So I went in there, and here he was by himself, and this man, I'd gotten to know his wife, and his wife was holding vigil at his bedside. It was right before Christmas, and she had gone home to make the Christmas Eve gumbo that she makes for her children and grandchildren. I remember her saying that she had 19 grandchildren, and there was nobody there, and he was getting ready to pass. And I thought to myself, all of the people that this man has met in his life, and his kids and his grandkids and his wife, and here I am, someone that he's only known, maybe a few weeks, and he's getting ready for a momentous occasion that he's passing from this world into the next. And I'm here holding his hand and telling him, don't be scared that, you're going to go and you're going to meet the Lord. And, just explaining to him how exciting it was going to be in heaven and everyone that would be waiting there for him. And nobody came and told me to get out of the room or to not pray with him or not sing to him. So I was like, well, I guess I could, do this with everybody now.
And so doing that for the first time, how does that, was that the first time you were ever with somebody who passed away in your presence?
Yes.
Okay. That's got to be something that's kind of inward for you. What's going on, in your mind, in your heart, while you're sitting there with this person who is leaving this life? Mm-hmm. How did that basically affect you?
Well, it impacted me tremendously. I always think about the 2 most important moments in your life: when you're born and then when you die. And then everything else in between that, it can be different for every single person. So everybody is born and everybody dies. So birth and I say this to anyone who I talk to about hospice, birth is so celebrated. You have a gender reveal party. You have the shower. Everybody's excited for the baby to come. And there's so much hoopla and excitement about it. But then the other thing that everyone goes through that happens to death, it's just shrouded in just secrecy. And, a lot of people run the other way from it and don't want to talk about it and use different words for it. They passed on or they're no longer with us. I felt so honored to be there with that man, that very first man that I was with when he passed, and every other person that I've had the opportunity to go to at their bedside. I just feel so honored. What an honor it is to be with someone as they leave this world to go into the next.
Well, and tell us about that. I have never been in the same room when somebody has passed away. What's it like?
It's like everything gets stripped away, almost like your focus is hyper-focused, and you get to know working with terminally ill people or people who work in hospitals or nursing homes or assisted livings. They would know, especially nurses, the signs when death is imminent, and then you let the family know, and to call the family to get the family there at the bedside, because most family members do all want to be there at the bedside. And everything slows down, kind of like when you're in an automobile accident or any kind of situation that's highly stressful. And then everything's just really calm and peaceful. And most of the time, you just feel a sense of peace. Now, there have been people who I have encountered in the nursing home who had a lot of regret, and they were struggling a lot at the end. And then they had a great need to confess what, they thought that they had done wrong in their life, and that they were concerned that they wouldn't, be passing on and going, to meet the Lord or whoever their God is, because, Jewish people pass away, and people of all different religions. It's not just Christians that I've been around that have passed, but for the most part, I would say 80%, it's just a very peaceful and beautiful transition, because it's going to happen to all of us at some point.
All right, and so you get the first job in the nursing home, and so then progresses from there to where you are now as far as your career and what you've done.
Yes. So I was absolutely fortunate enough to work for a small 60-bed nursing home in Mississippi. So I was able to know the patients on a first name basis, very personally. Then I moved to Texas, and when I was in Texas, I had multiple facilities that I was over, and I would go and consult and help them with their sales, but I wasn't really getting to know the residents, and I didn't like the position that I was in as someone who wasn't able to be around for multiple weeks and months, that I was constantly traveling around. But then I found my home in a memory care, and when I was at the memory care, that's when we had 25 people pass in a 3-month period. And it took its toll on all of us, all of the staff. But it was just, I found myself, even though I was the person who was in sales and I didn't have anything at that time to do with the job and the role of counseling and grief counseling and bereavement, I was still the person that the families came to, because I guess they felt so comfortable with me, and that I was able to help them grieve and get through the times leading up to death, and then once their loved one had passed.
And when you say memory care, I assume you're talking about Alzheimer's patients, dementia, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay. All right. But after that, then you get back into patient care, and tell us about that.
So then I transitioned over into hospice. I found that was something that I was very comfortable with. And, honestly, if I could get in a little time machine and go back, I would have gone to school and gotten my master's in divinity and become a chaplain, just because of everything that surrounds meeting with the families and talking with them and encouraging them. Of those conversations I enjoy so much better than a conversation of, okay, well, I'm trying to sell you something or encourage you to put your loved one into managed care. It's just a whole you can't even compare it. It's not even like comparing apples to oranges. It's so different.
So, I mean, how many people would you estimate that you've actually been with at the moment that they've passed away?
I would say probably around 60. And the only reason that number is so high is that we lost so many people. We lost so many people that summer, and that was actually the summer before COVID. And then during COVID, it was just a lot of people, multiple people every day.
Right. Well, what do you think happened to you? I mean, to make the light go on that where it's so important to help others than more of having a life where you focus on yourself.
Oh, sure. So I had focused on myself my entire life. You could get a microphone in front of my mom. She would say that I was probably one of the most self-absorbed teenagers, and I was definitely self-absorbed in my 20s. I mean, I was very focused on having fun and traveling and all that. And there's no, I don't want to say there's anything against traveling and going out and as a young woman experiencing these things before settling down and having children. But I don't ever remember doing anything for charity in my teens or in my 20s. I don't remember other than going to church and because I was raised, Catholic, going to church and putting money in the offering. I don't remember doing any kind of outreach like that. And I remember when my mother-in-law had died, that tumultuous year that all those things happened, I was standing in my kitchen and I was reading the newspaper. And it was actually the newspaper that I was one of the stringers for. I did some writing for them. And it was an article, and it was about an 11-year-old girl who had terminal cancer, and they were trying to raise money for her because it was a single mom who was raising her. And they were talking about this organization in Mississippi that raises money, and they provide wigs for cancer patients. So I saw that the little girl had cancer, and I just lost my mother-in-law to cancer. And I thought, well, let me try to get in touch with this woman who runs the organization. So I call her, and I get her on the phone, and I say, hey, my name is Aimee, my maiden name. And I said, and I was Mrs. Mississippi 2 years ago. And what if we take this little girl and we make her a princess for a day? And I get a limo, and I'll get her a shopping spree and a lunch. And my little daughter, oh my gosh, she was so cute. She was 7 at the time. She was a really good singer. And I said, we'll have my daughter sing. And she said, sure, if you can get all of that. And I said, of course I can get all that. I mean, I had that ability to make people want to get on board with whatever I was, pitching. And we did. We made that little girl a princess for a day. And I got to know her mom, and I got to know the woman who ran the organization. And they have had that ceremony, and they have made a cancer patient a princess for a day every year since then. And that started back in 2006. So
how do you go from it's all about Aimee to it's all about everybody else?
I guess when I was around 40 years old, I got to the point where I was stripped of everything materialistically. I mean, materialistically, yes, we lost our home, but we had plenty of insurance, and, we got back everything that we lost in Katrina. I mean, some things you can't replace. But to get to the point of being stripped of everything that I had materially, and I got very sick, and I had to have an operation, and I wasn't able to work, and I wasn't able to purchase groceries, and I was worried about how I was going to pay my car payment. And I think I did have an epiphany about what is important and what does matter. So that was around the time that I was 40, and I kind of had a spiritual awakening, as in it's not going to be all about me and what's on the outside. Maybe if given another chance, which I was after my surgery, it was a pretty sketchy time with my health, that I was going to give back. And, I found the perfect vehicle. The elderly. I mean, I absolutely love, and I am a advocate for the elderly, and I have gotten in many toe-to-toe situations with management at jobs that I've had, because I'm always on the side of the patient, and I'm always on the side of the elderly, no matter what the outcome.
So what advice would you give? Let's say someone who was kind of like you, a little self-absorbed, a little into themselves, somebody like that that's listening. What advice do you give them, to try to say, well, you may not want to focus all on yourself, but maybe there's some better things out there if you start focusing on other people.
I think that you have to have a situation or something in your life, like an aha moment, where you do lose all of your material possessions. I was still an attractive person, even though I didn't have the money or the stature or the title or anything. But to look inward rather than outward and think, well, who is someone that I can be a blessing to? Who is someone that's going to come across my path today? And it doesn't even have to be monetarily. It can almost be something that you look for, a situation or an opportunity to compliment someone or to help someone or to lift someone up. I mean, I'm focused on the elderly and everything that surrounds that. Even on the LGBTQ elderly, I volunteer because they are a population that is extremely vulnerable and can be discriminated. But find something that you love. Is it animals? Is it children? I mean, there's so many charities out there, and there's so much need in our country. It really is sad and tragic, and especially highlighted at the holiday season, that a land that has so much of bounty and plenty, that there's people right now who don't have enough food, who don't have electricity. My advice would be find something that you're passionate about and put maybe an hour of time, because I recruit volunteers to work with the terminally ill, and I never overwhelm them or bombard them and say, well, you have to give us 25 hours a week and, $100, worth of this or that. And I just say, just maybe 15 minutes, just maybe a phone call to someone who's terminally ill and just say, I'm here. I'm here to listen. What do you want to talk about?
And do you talk to nurses or other people in the healthcare field that treat the elderly? Do you talk to them or teach them or give them advice on what they ought to do?
Well, our nurses, and this is nurses at hospitals and nursing homes, SNFs, ALFs, memory cares, hospice, they are heroes. Oh my gosh, I wish I had an unlimited supply of money to buy nurses whatever they needed: spa appointments, massages, pedicures, manicures, bottles of wine. Oh, I just love our nurses so much. So I'm so inspired by them. I'll go to a home where it's just a tragic situation, and I'll talk to them about what they're going through and with the patient, and we just can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. But I'm in awe of nurses. They are and CNAs and health aides and social workers and chaplains and everybody on the team who works with the terminally ill, and then also the chronically sick. There's both sides of the coin.
What do you think your life's purpose is?
Oh my goodness. Well, if I had a cartoon character, it would be Defender of the Elderly with a little cape. DE. Absolutely.
Okay. And let's, I asked you about advice you'd give someone who's kind of, goes through life as being self-absorbed, but kind of the theme of this show of Rocket Motivation is, kind of overcoming adversity and getting through tough times. So, what advice would you give for somebody that's going through tough times, is dealing with adversity? What advice would you give them?
Okay, well, there's 4 words that I always say, and that is, this too shall pass. And I know when you're in the thick of it, either with a sickness or a sick family member or a financial crisis, or you just lost your entire home in a fire or a storm, the best thing that you can do is just rely on your faith and just keep saying those 4 words, because it's true and you don't feel it at the moment, but this too shall pass, and you'll get it behind you, and then you'll be able to move forward and hopefully learning more and knowing more from what you've been through.
And do you see yourself, going forward, you found your niche? You feel good with where you are and as the defender of the elderly.
That's right. That's right. I'll get myself a little cape and make a little Halloween costume.
All right. And now, Aimee, what I like to do on all the shows to wrap them up is to give the guests the parting shot where, there's got to be something that we hadn't talked about that you can think of, some great advice to give to the listeners before we go. So now's your time. What can you tell everybody?
Okay. Well, there's this story, and it's about a king, and he really needed someone to give him excellent advice. So he found this sage who was out in the village, and this sage was like a nobody. I mean, he just was very poor, and he came in with his tattered clothes. And he said to the king, yes, I will be the person that will give you your advice and lead you in the right way. And the king said, well, you can have anything you want in my kingdom, and you will be dressed in the finest robes and eat the finest food and wear all these jewels and wear a crown. And the sage said, well, what I want is a room to myself that only I have the key that I can go to, and nobody can go in the room. And the king said, okay. Well, weeks went by, and it was driving the king crazy because it was in his palace, but he couldn't go in the room, and he didn't have the key. The sage had the only key. So he got his men to break down the door, and he broke the door down, and the room was empty, and there was kind of like a coat rack with the tattered clothes that the sage had worn in when he came to the kingdom. And the sage walked in behind me, and he said, what have you done? You broke my trust. You've broken into my room. And the king said, well, what is this? And he said, I come in here to remember. And I take off my fine clothes, and I take off my jewels, and I put on my tattered clothes, and I am stripped of everything that you've given me, and I just remember who I am. So that's what it's all about. We had all go back to who we were, just ourselves, without our cars and beautiful clothing and jewelry and credit cards and fine homes.
Gotcha. Well, Aimee, it's been a pleasure having you here. I want to thank you so much for coming in, and you're such an inspiration with what you do with the elderly, and the transformation you made in your life is just spectacular. You've made a great guest on the show. So thanks for coming.
Well, thank you. And I also think my mom would be proud.
Oh, good. All right. Thanks a lot. What a great episode with Aimee Barresi. She transformed herself from living a life all about her to one of focusing on others. Just a great story. Next week's guest is Chuck Thuss. He's a former hockey goalie who's going to tell his story about coping with mental illness and helping others do the same. Going to be a great episode. See you next week. If you're interested in getting my book, Get Back Up, just go to Amazon and put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Caden. It'll pop right up. I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it if you'd share it with a friend. I would like as many people to hear my message as possible. Never give up and always get back up. And we'll see you next week.